Friends, country folk, lend me your ears or ear if you just have one of them. This is Jaime Alejandro, and I want to welcome you to the Arts Calling Podcast, the podcast where I interview hardworking independent creatives who are doing amazing work in the literary, visual, and performing arts. We have a wonderful conversation lined up today. It's going to be a really, really good time. But before I get to it, I just want to air some grievances, give you some updates, and give a shout out because that's always really, really fun. Now, before I get the ball rolling, if you have any complaints against me, or if you want to insult my character, or give me a compliment on how the show's doing, or if there's questions that I should be asking, go ahead and shoot me an email at artscallingpodcast@gmail.com. That is the brand spanking new email address for the podcast. So please feel free to check that out and let me know how you're doing, or if you're working on something cool. Previous guests welcome so that I can give you a shout out before the episode. That would be really cool as well. As you can tell, I've had my coffee and I am very giggly right now for some reason, but one shout out real quick and I will introduce my guest. I hope that you folks have a chance to go check out a YouTube interview series called A Word with Kelly Scott Reed, who is a friend of the Twitter community and a friend of the show over at Roy Fanian Press. And she interviews, much like Arts Calling, they do wonderful in-depth interviews with people who are releasing their work and leaving their mark on independent publishing. Great stuff, and I just love Kelly's interview style. So I hope that if you check out Arts Calling, you'll also go check out A Word with Kelly Scott Reed. I'll make sure to give a shout out in the episode description as well so you folks can check out her work. Well done, Kelly. You're killing it over there, and so is the press. With that said, I'd like to take a moment to introduce our guest today. I am thrilled to be Arts Calling Anna Dickson James. And a little bit about Anna. Anna earned her MFA in creative writing from Queen's University of Charlotte, North Carolina, and teaches English at Garrett College in Deep Creek, Maryland. Her work has appeared in Anthology of Appalachian Writers. She was a two-time finalist for the West Virginia Fiction Prize and has won numerous awards from West Virginia Writers Incorporated. Writing these stories helped her understand a time in her life when she gave up much of her personal power, and the compilation of this collection was an avenue for helping her to reclaim it. And I gotta say, this was such a blast to talk to Anna, and I hope that you enjoy the conversation as much as I did. Her latest short story collection, Boys Buy Me Drinks to Watch Me Fall Down, is now available from Whiskey Tit Publishing. They're doing amazing work over there. Really bold, weird stuff, and I really dig their approach. And so I think I've said enough, so let's give her a call. Hello, anybody there?
Hello, I'm sorry. I didn't realize that I needed to click a button to get in. I've never used Google Meet.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this and for trying to work with me on this weird technology. It just works so easy because it's integrated with Google and everything, and they own my soul already. So I said, it's fine. Just do the thing.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, not a problem at all. Can you tell me where are you these days?
I am in Pennsylvania right now. So I live in the southwestern part of Pennsylvania, and I teach at Garrett College in Maryland.
Oh, okay, wonderful. Has that been your home site for a while?
I've been here about 6 years. Prior to that, I was in Charleston, West Virginia.
Okay. So was West Virginia home, or where was home originally for you? Like when you were younger, where'd you grow up?
Yeah, everywhere was home for me. So I was born in Arizona. I was raised in Pittsburgh. I spent most of my adult life in Philly, sometime in Seattle, sometime in Delaware, sometime in Charleston, and now here's where I'm at currently.
So home is a deconstruction, right? It's neither here nor there. You're kind of okay, kind of where the wind takes you in some respects.
Home is where the people you love are.
Lovely.
Oh, that's corny.
I'm okay with that. I think there's good mantras in corny. But before we get to talking about Boys Buy Me Drinks to Watch Me Fall Down, which is a phenomenal title, I love all these titles that you have in here. And I got to give you a shout out here. The collection is phenomenal and such a such a raw exploration of so many things. I felt such vulnerability and such openness, but the characters are so damn good and such a delight to read. So I want to commend you for that, because I had a really wonderful time reading this. But before we get to it, before we get to the collection, I'd like to check in with you on how you find writing and how you make your way to the craft.
Yeah, so I write because, I mean, pardon me again for being corny, because I really feel like I don't have a choice whether or not to do it. So it's a way that I unknot the knots that are in my brain and in my heart. And so if I go too long without doing it, I feel myself coiling and coiling.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't really feel like much of a choice for me. And it also feels good to me.
Yeah.
So those two things lead me there.
Yeah, yeah. And so I remember you had mentioned in a podcast that, or maybe an article or something, that you have been writing for as long as you can remember. And I'm sure that there's
Mhm.
a lot of stop and go along the way. But when you first started, do you remember what kinds of things you were writing, or what kind of mediums were you exploring in the beginning?
Yeah, I was writing horror because that is just what my brother wrote, and I loved my brother and I wanted to be just like him. So I was writing these adorable little horror stories as a kid. And then I was also emulating A Tree Grows in Brooklyn as much as I could, because that was the first book that really led me to feel big emotions, like really, really big emotions. And I wanted to do that. I wanted to do that for other people.
Can I ask you about big emotions? What were those big emotions, or
Mhm.
what were those things that you felt like maybe were beyond you at one point?
Well, I grew up poor. I grew up poor, and so I really related to Francie and the struggles related to that. Her father was an alcoholic, and so I had that in common as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really appreciated how that character was on the page and surviving and growing. I mean, the whole thing, the tree is coming up out of the cement. And so I really wanted to, I don't know, write this kind of hopeful stuff in the midst of things that were challenging for me.
Yeah. And it seems like there was a seed of something that you have done really successfully in the collection. And again, I don't want to jump to it, but I'm kind of like chomping at the bit, because I think when you mention those little bits of hope, when there is such brutality in the world, or perhaps growing up, or really difficult things such as the ones that you explore in the collection, like there's a little glimmer, there's a little something there that keeps you going. And it's so empowering, I think, in the writing. But as we go into your creative journey, you're an educator as well. And so how does that fit into your life? How do you find that education is something that will be a good fit for you, or pursue that?
Well, I'm a natural teacher, so I love to help people explore and come to their full potential. And I also teach writing. So I help them to express themselves. A lot of times people have ideas up in their head, and something happens when it tries to travel down the arm onto the screen, like something gets gummed up.
Yeah.
And so I love my job of helping students to be able to express themselves and to really understand themselves through writing.
Yeah. So was this something like you were in like high school or something and said, I'm going to be a teacher and that's the thing and I'm going to stick to it? Or was there a journey of discovery where you maybe tried one thing or something else?
Mhm. Yeah, I didn't know what I wanted to do or be. I knew that when I went to college, I adored my professors and I wanted to be just like them. But
Mm,
coming from the background I came from, I thought professors were highfalutin people and I would never get to
mm,
be a professor. And I know that sounds strange to say, like, I can't attain being a professor, but I really
yeah.
didn't think that that was even possible for me. So
Yeah.
to be living my dream job now is wonderful.
Yeah, that's a delightful thing to hear, because I feel like, coming from a similar background, from what you've shared, I feel like there is an invisible ceiling of some kind, especially when you're from a place of poverty, or little means, you feel like there is only so far where you can go. Kind of like the Hobbits, where they say, "This is the farthest I've ever been from home, and this is as far as I'm going to go." There's nothing really else that is within the purview of my possibility, and it's great to see. And so I think it's a great model. But why is that? Why is there just kind of like an invisible veil that prevents some folks from feeling, no, that particular dream is off limits? What happens there?
I think it's different for every person, but there's something about the world that tells you you can't do it. And I think even if even if the world doesn't explicitly say, at least in my generation, it might be different for kids now, they're told you can be or do anything. And so I think it's different now
Yeah,
than it was
yeah,
when I was young, when I was going to school. But I do think that we also live up to our limits that we're surrounded by. We only can see what we can see, and we can only see what the example is for us. Like, neither of my parents went to college. And so, that seemed like a dream that was very, very far away.
yeah, for sure. And as an educator, how do you feel that makes its way into the way that you interact with your students, or the way that you pass on certain bits of insight to them? Is that something that is more intellectual than not? I mean, do you feel like it's an affliction that is still there, or is it just something that's not really in the I guess in the framework of how you go about educating?
Well, first of all, I tell my story in the classroom. I'm very, very connected to my students. And so I tell them where I came from, just so they know they can go anywhere that they want to go. I think the challenge that I see with students today is they don't understand. I think they think you're either born with it or you're not. I
Mm,
don't think that they understand how to be disappointed, how to fail, how to, get knocked down and keep coming back up. So one of the things I teach all the time is, let me model how to make mistakes for you, because I just do. I make a lot of mistakes. And so I tell them, you're going to suck at writing. So this first essay, you're going to suck. It is not going to be good. But if you apply yourself, here are the things you need to do to get better. It's teaching growth mindset.
yeah. That is such a fascinating situation that we have going on, because the more you think about it, yes, these younger generations are used to having a curated feed of everything of their life, and at the same time, it's like we're robbing them of the opportunity to really be themselves through the f ups, right? The fuck ups. It's my podcast.
Yeah.
I'll say whatever. I'm sorry. The
I've got a
mistakes.
potty mouth. You've read my book.
Yeah. Yeah, but it fits, right? It just makes perfect sense in your work. And you know what? I'm so ready to talk about this collection that I'm just gonna start babbling on about it, even though I have all kinds of other questions about life and parenting and all kinds of stuff. But let's talk about Boys Buy Me Drinks to Watch Me Fall Down, which is again, as I said, such a delight to read. I felt like there was this wounded howl. There was a lot of primal intensity there. There was conversation about sexuality, about the logistics of the emotional burden of just being around as a human being, and primarily a woman in this modern climate, but also just as a human being. There was a lot of heartbreak, but types of liberations and redemptions throughout every story, and I keep just gushing about this work. But can you tell me, in terms of backing up to the genesis of this collection, can you put me in the moment when you first started seeing the potential of a work like this? Obviously, you've been writing and working on these stories for a long time, but when did you look at what you had and identify that this is something that could live together?
I think that it's all very closely related. So even though, Rebound is different from Sommelier Mort Vivant, even though the stories are so different, I think the theme of, sticking it out, coming through difficult times, I think all of that was present. Like, the themes are kind of the same. But really, it came down to, I had a friend. He asked me from my MFA, David Scott Hay, who's an amazing writer himself.
Mm-hmm.
He asked me if I was still writing. I said yes. I was sending him the stories, and he said this would make a great collection. So really, it was somebody outside of me who
Mm.
inspired me to put them all together.
Oh, it's amazing. And I had the pleasure of talking with David Scott Hay a few weeks ago, and what an
Oh, you
awesome dude.
know David.
Yeah. I talked to him and we got connected through Whiskey Tit, which is an amazing home for really wonderful work, your publisher. And what a cool guy. Really inspiring and really willing to kind of get you to the place where you need to be, it seems. So what a blessing. I mean, it's great to know people like that from MFA.
He's amazing. We call ourselves foxhole buddies.
Oh.
He's a gem.
So, what were the kind of anchors that you were seeing there? Because obviously, as you're mentioning, there is a lot of running through lines. And I think the thing that I appreciated most that kind of ran through a lot of them was this undercurrent of a tension, of a building. There was anxiety. There's anxiety building through these pieces, but I think it sort of adds up to a restlessness in the expectation of what a woman should be and the things they relinquish, right? Can you sort of guide me there in how you arrive at that, or if we could talk about that a little bit more?
Well, I think this fictional collection is on paper me finding myself through these fictional characters. And so pretty much, I mean, you can look at any story and you can see me developing like a Polaroid picture. So you can read Rebound and you can see me working through today's beauty culture, having filters on everything, extreme plastic surgery measures, things like that. So you can see me working through that issue. You can see me working through, this phase of my life when I was drinking too much. You can see me doing that, and you can see me working through that in the easy chair,
Uh-huh.
working through addiction, that sort of thing.
Right. I got to say, while we're talking about, something like Rebound or even I think Sommelier is the best example of that. It's so brutal. It's so good. And genre plays a huge part in those. And I'm curious how, in your writing of these pieces, how genre makes its way in. Is it the first impulse that you have when you're writing some of these pieces, or is it something that comes later as metaphor?
So this is a challenge for me to answer because I do believe my subconscious is writing these stories. And then when I look back, I say, oh, well, this is about the end of my marriage, right?
Yeah.
Or, and I think that I really had a fascination with stories that were, with reading, my own reading, stories that were quirky, a little bit different, a little bit, so I'm like, I'm going to write a literary zombie story, or I'm going to write about an easy chair that comes to life, so I kind of like that surreal whatever. And so I was very deliberate about trying to incorporate those elements because they're freaking fun. And I know that my themes can be dark, and I also wanted to have fun with it.
Yeah, there's a great balance. And I think that's what you do so successfully in these pieces is there is such levity, but then it turns immediately, and it gives you that surprise, that gut punch that is so incredible. Like I go back to Sommelier or the Easy Chair being another one that is just out of control. It's wonderful, but you feel so intensely, and the character motivations are they're driven, and they're also emotional ones. And I think that one of the things that I found that you did really well with all of these characters is how true and honest they all felt in the moment. And you could understand the rationale behind a lot of these gruesome, horrific things that were unfolding. And I was just really taken with that. But could you give me an example of one of these stories and how they came to be? Like, if, say, we could pick one of these from the bunch, and you're very generous with the amount of stories that you gave us. So that's another plus about this collection, which I loved. The range is spectacular. But if you could single out a story that gave you the most trouble in assembling or workshopping or working through, did you have one of those experiences with any of these?
Yeah, I mean, some of them I really wrestled and pummeled to the ground, and some of them were very, very challenging. I'll start with some sommelier. That actually started with a line or this idea about zombies, and I wrote it down on a Post-it, and it sat in my office right in front of my computer for 2 years. And it was this idea that, brains, the intellectualism in America is dying out. Intellectual rigor is dying out. And so if zombies eat brains, they're starving as well because they have no real food to eat. And so I held on to that and I held on to that. And so I went to write a story about the intellectual decline in America. And I don't know what the hell happened, but it became about the end of my marriage. Like I don't know how it happened. Like I said, I do think it's so much of it is subconscious. And so I start with an intention, and who knows what I'm going to kind of end up with.
And so let's kind of dig into the subconscious aspect of it, because I love it. I think it's pure honesty with yourself, especially when you've gotten to the point in your writing career where I imagine it's just like turning on the light switch or the faucet turns on, and then you continue to create content, but then you're sifting through to generate structure or form of some kind. Could you elaborate a little bit on that? Because I just think it's so difficult to do, because again, the idea of expectation and perfectionism and things like that. How does one arrive at that place?
Well, you get it all down on the page, and then you go back and you craft the hell out of it. You say, all right, your protagonist needs to want something urgently. So these are your ramblings about living on a hill in West Virginia and being away from family. But what does the protagonist want? And so then you just have to add that zeros and ones at the Funk You Festival. I think that's what it's still called. Yeah. Is it still called that?
Yeah.
Okay. So if I'm trying to, make my protagonist want something or something, like I didn't have in there originally that she was exhausted, that all she wanted to do was sleep. Like that wasn't even in there when I did the first runaround. It was all just plot about what happens at that festival. And I was like, I need more tension. I need to ramp it up. And so I added that. That's sheer 100% craft. Because I learned it. Somebody taught me it, and then I practiced it.
And so it becomes a matter of work, right? Understanding that this is just pure work, and you gotta get to the desk and get it done, which has to be just a beautiful thing to know that the process is completely demystified, and now you just have yourself and your effort to contend with, and that's got to be a phenomenal feeling. So, I mean, speaking of that story, there was a horrific line in that. I don't know how you do this, but there's a very approachable situation, and then there's like a little jab. There's a little something that happens, and I kind of don't want to give it away though, but there's the moment with the little boy, and she says something about that little boy that is haunting and so on point that I just almost don't think if we should completely divulge it, because it's heartbreaking. So I'm curious when because I guess the question is about censorship, self-censorship, and when do you stop, or when do you say this is not helping, it becomes shock, or how do you tether to the reality of the story?
Okay, so I think with that story, that happened to me. That was a real thing that happened. And I was like, I need to write this. And that was exactly how I felt about what happened.
Yeah.
And I felt like I need to get it on the page. And if you don't like it, I can't help that. Like some things are craft. Like don't put out shitty stories. But I'm not going to put out stories that aren't for me. And I had a very, I went to an amazing MFA program. One of my thesis advisors, incredibly celebrated, amazing author. And she read Myrsa and the Cannibal. And she said about that piece, this is so gross that I would stop reading, except I am paid to continue. That's what she said, which that's okay. That's okay to me. And I thought to myself, she loved my other stories or whatever. And I thought to myself, this story is not for you. You have not really experienced an abusive relationship, or you would understand. These are the things that you would feel. And so this is about finding your audience. There are people that are going to love your work and there are people that aren't going to love your work. And so I wasn't going to change that story. Somebody told me that in sommelier, a baby gets eaten, and somebody told me that was way too gross and not to do it. And no, I had to do it. I couldn't take that out. And so while there may be, I don't censor what I put out there. It's up to the audience to decide how they feel about it. But I don't want to put out shit. That's the only thing I want to censor, is putting out writing.
And I love that you mentioned sommelier again, because the placement of that story right at the beginning, when that moment occurs in the story, it's early on, and it sets the tone for the entirety of the thing because it's raw, but it's honest. It's not going to bullshit you about what the collection is going to be, which I think is so successful. But coming back to MRSA, that one, I sat with that story and I took a minute, because as a man, that's one of the most powerful things I've read about the behaviors of men, which I think is one of the through lines of the story, and how the manipulation occurs and how troubling and devastating it can be, but to present it with such honesty and empathy for the female perspective, I thought was just one of the triumphs of the collection. So that's one that I was like, oh, okay, I'm glad she brought that one up, because yeah, I put the thing down, I was reading on the tablet and I was like, what? Okay, I need a minute. It was so wonderful. I don't want to give these away. I think that's the thing, because all of these have an element of wonder and surprise and a punch at the end that I don't really want to divulge. But if we could speak generally about the collection, as you were working to put it together with a publisher, and maybe we can talk about how you find Whiskey Tit, how you make that relationship work, and what were the benefits of working with those guys?
I had so much autonomy that it was amazing. I had autonomy. I created my cover. Like I found the artist to do my cover. I don't know if you saw it. It's pretty remarkable.
And you had okay, I gotta say, the piñata makes an appearance. That's probably my favorite story in here. I mean, all of them are just remarkable, but that one really sticks out for me, and we'll talk about that one here in a bit. But please tell me about the cover and how that one happened, and then we'll move on to the publisher.
So two of my favorite West Virginia artists, Brian Pickens and Eric Pardue, did a collaboration. I love them both. Eric did the artwork. That's the kind of things he does. He does these collage with retro style pieces. And I've been a fan of his for years. And so when he said he would help me with this, I was just delighted and thrilled. And then Brian Pickens did his graphic design dust on the print, and I couldn't be more delighted.
Yeah. And so you got to bring those guys aboard the project when you got to Whiskey Tit. And tell me about that a little bit more. Like, how do you find the publisher? How do they find you? And how it moves forward from there?
Yeah, again, David championed me to Whiskey Tit because he already had a book published through them. And so he went to Miette and he sent her a couple of my stories. She didn't even read the entire collection, but she read a couple stories and signed me on, which was an absolute thrill. And then she let me pick the collection. She let me organize it. I worked closely with David. Yeah, I worked closely with David. He was my, he was like, you got to fix this. You got to do that. You can't do, this title sucks, So he did that kind of editing for me, which was a real gift. But beyond that, she trusts the artists and gives them autonomy, and you cannot beat that. I mean, it's phenomenal. Yeah. And she's smart and she knows, amazing writing. So I feel really, really lucky to be housed with these other writers. Oh, I'm lucky.
That's amazing. And so the book came out this summer, or are we looking at?
Yeah. We had some printing. So there was lots of flooding, and I think she's in Vermont where she was at, and so that put us behind. But it's going to print right now, and so it's going to be out at the end of the month.
Oh, okay, wonderful. Yeah. So what's the feeling? What is the kind of response that you're feeling now after completing it? Before we get to an audience, just your personal feeling with the collection as it is now, and completing this after so long. I'm just kind of obsessed with that post high of completing it. So if you could share that feeling, let us know what that anticipation is.
So when it first went out, I was nauseated and sick because so much of me is on that page. And I knew putting that out there was exposing myself. And so I was physically sick about it for, I don't know how long I was, but now I'm looking back on it and I'm thinking how proud I am. I'm thinking how I've grown as a writer. I'm thinking about how I've grown as a person. So just having it out there feels so good. I thought I might die with these on a thumb drive, and then my kids wouldn't even know it was on there and they'd throw it out and then it goes nowhere. But now there's this physical book that belongs. Someone's going to take it to Goodwill. Someone's going to see it at Goodwill later. And that's very exciting to me.
Oh man. And that is such a joy. As a parent, I feel like I'm learning more and more with every guest that I talk to, especially, the people who are parents themselves, what a precious gift it is to be able to say, this is the thing that I love doing. You don't have to love it, but the fact that this is happening, I mean, that's got to be such a tremendous feeling. So how do your kids feel about your writing? Not that they have to read everything or anything, but how do they feel about it?
My kids are incredibly proud, and so they're very, very supportive. I don't know if they haven't read all of the stories, and I don't think that they want to. They were like, I don't want to be triggered. They have read the stories that I quoted them in, which was, I'm so sorry, I'm forgetting the title of my own dang story.
You tell me which one. I got the index here.
Yeah, Circle Squiggle Free.
Oh yeah.
So they're quoted in that, and they don't come across looking very good. But they're like, yeah, that was us. We're rascals, So they love seeing themselves represented as well.
Yeah, that's a great sign of emotional intelligence, though, is understanding where you're coming short. So it sounds like you did a good job. But I think what I love about this is that it's so singular in the way that it's not a complaint book. I think very easily you could fall into the territory of the female perspective being, why doesn't anybody listen to me? Why doesn't anybody do this or that? But there is extreme empathy at play here, where even those who are in the periphery of your life, there's still humanity there, and of course emanating from the central voices of the stories, like in I guess Circle Squiggle Free is a really good one because it is dehumanized by that checklist of time, right? But it's still very true. And then at the end, you just want relief. For God's sake, just let the protagonist have relief. And I also felt that way about. I guess I'm just gonna give you my two favorite ones here. Obviously, The Girl in the Piñata was just a lovely showcase of broken people wanting something, and very easily you could have gone, oh, that guy's a piece of shit, or this person is a liar or an awful person. But the way that you built and fostered that, that was a really beautiful showcase of character. So that one I just thought was remarkable. The most powerful one, in my opinion, because I just have such religious hangups about Catholicism and a lot of the way that I was brought up, was The Rapture of Anne Marie Abbott.
Yes.
I thought, what a gem of a piece. And how, I guess I want to ask you about faith, because it seems to be something that you have mentioned in previous podcasts and conversations. And for that story in particular, how does faith evolve from how you saw it once, and then there were obviously perhaps personal raptures that may have occurred, not what's written down, of course, but how has that evolved for you? How has faith evolved for you, if I may ask?
Well, I grew up in a pretty conservative Baptist church, going to church camp and those sorts of things. And then I had a real heart conversion my freshman year of college. And then I just my spirituality developed. And so it went from Christianity is the only way to quote unquote be saved to, I believe there are many paths to God. I'm not even sure what God looks like. I think that there is this universal presence or being that I tap into, occasionally, but I don't have this guilt, this belief in original sin. I don't
Mm-hmm.
have that anymore.
Yeah.
And so I don't have that. That really weighed me down quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't have that anymore. In that particular piece, I had tried on at one point, there is a spiritual, I can't remember her name, but she would talk about Jesus as her lover, like having a sexual relationship with Jesus. And
Mm-hmm.
so I tried that on, a little bit to see how that would go, or it didn't quite work for me. It never quite stuck, but it came out in my writing. I mean, I put it in there with Anne Marie.
Right, right. But I thank you so much for that, because as somebody who struggled with that on and off,
Mhm.
that story just resonated with me so much, because the idea of guilt, the idea of shame, and
Mhm.
even though we're speaking about it from a religious standpoint, as from a feminine perspective, that you've shared, that seems to be a huge aspect as well. The idea of shame, societal shame,
Mhm.
expectation, and I think it really converges in that story, in that you have these two huge barriers. And I guess I shouldn't call them barriers, but the expectation of faith and femininity coming together in such a way was really devastating. But also, again, you find a way to
Mhm.
bring it back to a kind of I don't want to say upbeat ending, but but
I
but there
love that ending. I love the ending to that
it's
story.
marvelous, because you take spiritual conventions and really make them an internalized character development, a character resolution, and there is a peace, there is a relief. So that
Mhm.
one, again, just wonderful work there. Only got a couple more questions, to be mindful of your time, but this is phenomenal, and I can't thank you enough for your time. Um, let's talk for a minute about the title story, "Boys Buy Me Drinks to Watch Me Fall Down." If you could share a bit about how that story came to be the title of the collection, but also maybe the origins of that story.
So again, that situation happened to me. So I pretty much wrote it almost verbatim
Mm,
how it happened to me. And because the outcome was what it was, I didn't understand my negative emotions about it. I didn't understand, I don't know, how much do I say? How much do I say? I didn't understand why I was still upset. And so I felt like, so I wrote through it. I was like, let me write this stuff down and see what I discover. And so then I realized that I felt I felt set up.
mm,
Yeah,
mm-hmm.
maybe I
Yeah,
don't know how else to talk about it except that
yeah,
I
yeah.
felt set up for him to be generous to me. And that pissed me off when I realized that.
Mm, yeah. And now that you mention that, that is the cornerstone of
Mhm.
of really what you're trying to articulate here, and it makes perfect sense, because you feel like, why the hell should you be the one? Why should you be the one to set up the situation, to elevate the opposite sex, to elevate the person to do
Mhm.
their good deed, their good thing? And it is a dirty feeling. It is a heartbreaking feeling. Like, why is it that we have to do this? And I'm just saying, the protagonist,
Yeah.
speaking that way, but effective, because it leaves you lingering, and that sort of feeling of personal, I guess, disappointment. You're like, how could I do
Yeah.
that? How could I do that?
Yeah.
But it permeates through, and I think it just kind of casts the tone around the other stories as well. But let's talk about the way that you find the structure of the collection. Um,
Mhm.
what guides the way that you put these together in the order? What helps you determine the order of the stories?
Yeah, I sought out friends and advice to really figure out how do you put together a collection? Like, how do you curate that mixtape where it has some kind of crescendo and then it kind of, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I just know that I wanted to I wanted people to know early on what kind of book this was. So I put Art of Drowning, which had surreal elements. I had, the zombie story. I wanted people to know that this was a little bit, that you weren't going to get straight story. You were going to get some surrealism. You were going to get some zombies. And I wanted, I don't know, I wanted people to know that there would be sex in this collection. And so I added that pretty early on too. And then in the middle, it was more of the quieter stories, the ones that were more reflective. And then I wanted to end on that kind of stronger, more energy. I ended the collection, I think, with more energy. So
yeah.
I was thinking of it like a mixtape.
Oh, I love that. That's actually the best way to think about a collection. So lastly, I got a couple more questions here, but let's talk about some things that you're experiencing now in terms of media, books, entertainment, something that has inspired you or maybe gotten you on the right track again, that fulfills your aesthetic in some way. What kind of work are you enjoying that does that for you?
Enjoying taking in?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, Mrs. Davis. I mean, talk about having sex with Jesus. I mean, I was like, hey, that's in my book. I was like, I wrote that. I don't know if you've seen it. It's pretty freaking amazing. It's on Peacock. It's about a nun who is battling AI to save the world. Oh my God. And it's freaking phenomenal. And she's a badass nun, and I love it. And so that's been really inspiring to me. Is it called The Bear or Bear?
The Bear.
The tension in this season was phenomenal, especially the one episode, The Fork, was pretty freaking incredible. It's like, how do you write tension? That's it. I've been listening to music that's sending me. So I'm getting all kinds of input, stimulation from hiking, seeing new places, travel. It's all coming in. And I cannot wait for all of that to get mixed up in my brain and on the page. Yeah, I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm excited about it.
So there's no tentative follow-up right now in terms of like more short stories or things. Oh, actually, no. Now that I ask you, you mentioned this on the other podcast. You're working on something really cool.
It's the best thing I've ever done. I'm so excited about it.
That might be one of the coolest pitches that I heard. So I'm going to have you repeat that here if you could for my own excitement here, because it sounded really awesome.
Well, it's called The Sky King, and it's a choose your own literary adventure that explores, a meteor is coming down to Earth. And so you've got to choose which way you're going to go. And so it's exploring what happens to you after you die. And does your current life, does that impact where you go when you die or what happens to you when you die? So there's all these scenarios where you get different, maybe you get heaven, maybe you get hell, maybe there is no heaven, maybe there is no hell, maybe Satan himself gets reconciled to God. It's phenomenal. I mean, in my head, I don't mean it's an amazing book and you should buy it. I'm not saying that right now, but it's phenomenal to work on is what I'm trying to say. You can hear my energy about it.
Oh yeah, yeah. And I was so excited because I was like making dinner or something, listening to that podcast, and you said that, and I was like, oh my God, that like checks all the boxes for me. There's like genre, there's faith, there's all kinds of really quirky, strange things, and choose your own adventure is I mean, that's got to be a challenging beast of a thing to try to navigate. So I'm really excited for you to sort that out and try to, form your own thing there. I think it's going to be phenomenal, and I can't wait to read it. I'll just say that much.
Thank you. Yeah. It did just get a semifinalist in the Ohio State fiction competition.
Oh, wonderful.
So I got some feedback already. So that's amazing.
Oh, that's great to hear. So now that leaves us hoping for, for the follow-up. So that's going to be wonderful. And lastly, I just want to make sure that we can pass on a bit of guidance to folks who are just in the process of starting their creative journey. As an educator, you probably have a great perspective on this, or at least maybe some tried and true points of wisdom. What are some things that you wish you would have known when you first started writing, or things that have helped you along the way more than others?
Yeah, I think the biggest lesson I learned is that I used to write and I would have a gut instinct that this wasn't quite the best that it could be. And I would think, oh, it's good enough. Mm. And I've realized it's good enough is not good enough. You've got to hone every damn sentence. And then you have to look at every paragraph, then you have to look at every chapter or story. If you can't half-ass it. You can't. Maybe, your first drafts, your second drafts, your third drafts, maybe, but by the time you're getting it to where you want to take it out, I think you just have to give it 100% your best. And then number two, you can't do that by yourself because you become blind to it. And you've got to find your people that are going to read your work, provide feedback, encouragement, even. Writing is such a solitary thing. We do it alone in our rooms. You've got to get out there and meet your people. So those two things, don't settle for crap and find your people.
I love it. And that is a beautiful note to end on. But Anna, this has been such a blast. I got to say, I'm truly a fan of your work. I think you manage that balance so remarkably that I'm definitely going to be reading this collection once again in the next little while. I just got to let it breathe. But I want to thank you for sharing these insights, for being so honest in your work and today, and for being a badass. This has been a wonderful time, and I really hope that we get to chat once you get the next one, because I think it's going to be wonderful.
Yes. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for reading my work. That means so much to me. I really appreciate it. Wonderful questions as well.
Oh, great to hear. Well, I will let you enjoy your Sunday, and I'll be in touch on the internet real soon. Okay.
Great. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.